In the United States, a man was flying through the sky, destroying evil around the country, and was a savior to the people. And no, this wasn't Jesus Christ. This was Homelander, a superhero blessed with the powers to save the people of America.
Wasn't I chosen to save you? Is it not my God-given purpose to protect the United States of America?
He was a patriot, a powerful figure that the people looked up to, because it was he who had their best interests at heart. At least, that's what they thought.
Stay the back or I'll laser you, goddammit! I'll laser every one of you! I think you should jump.
I don't think I want to. I just want to get down.
I'm not suggesting anymore. Jump.
What many assumed was a hero was actually a murderous monster, killing hundreds behind the scenes, but then using psychological tactics to cover his traces and win over the masses. He'd been able to manipulate his image, allowing him to thrive in his darkness. And what I want to do in this investigation is break down his dark psychology and figure out not just how a man could be so evil, but why.
Get in the oven or your family goes in with you.
Your need for love is so deep. We'll never be able to overcome that.
No God. The only man in the sky is me.
Residing in New York City was a multi-billion-dollar corporation called Vought. Vought were, on paper, a pharmaceutical company, producing a drug called Compound V, which gave regular people these superhuman abilities. A lot of the public, however, believed that these powers were God-given and therefore looked up to these mutants, which Vought then used to market the company as a superhero company, choosing to employ the best 7 supes, which they called the Seven, and put them at the forefront of stopping major crimes occurring. And it was run by CEO Stan Edgar and Vice President of Hero Management Madeline Stillwell. And at the top of the 7, the leader was a charismatic hero with the most complete superpowers. He could fly, he had heat vision, he had super strength, super hearing, and super charm.
58-10! The righteous shall rejoice when he sees the vengeance, and he will bathe his feet in the blood of the wicked.
But the thing is, a lot of this was marketing. Homelander was trained to act a certain way and say all the right things. He'd constantly tell the people that they were the real heroes.
You guys, you are the real heroes. Captain, you guys are the real heroes. We're just glad we can help, right?
That's right.
Hey, do me a favor. Who's the real heroes? You guys are the real heroes. God bless you. Love you guys.
Even the body language was on point with the Superman hands on hips, and he spoke with a constant optimism in front of a crowd. But this wasn't who he truly was. There was a transatlantic flight from Paris headed to Chicago that was hijacked by terrorists, and Madeline Stillwell decided to send Homelander and another 7-member, Queen Maeve, to save the plane. Homelander flies them up and into the plane and kills the terrorists, and the passengers on board cheer at the sight of their favorite heroes here to save the day. However, when Maeve and Homelander entered the cockpit, there was one more terrorist to kill, and he had a gun to the pilot's head. In a panic, the terrorist shoots the pilot, and Homelander then uses his heat vision to kill the terrorist. When doing so, he also damages the plane's controls, which starts sending the plane downwards to an imminent crash. As expected, Maeve then pleads for Homelander to save the rest of the passengers, but she's met with excuses.
Lift the plane? How? There's nothing to stand on. It's air.
I don't know. Fly at it. Ram it straight.
That kind of speed, either the plane goes ass over tit or I'll punch straight through the hull.
Whether or not he could have physically stopped the plane, that wasn't his concern. He couldn't be bothered to make the effort and try, and he knew if he just let the passengers die, he could twist the story how he wanted anyway. So out of pure evil nature, he forces Maeve to leave the passengers and flies away, letting the plane crash into the ocean, leaving no survivors. He would later give a speech at the victims' funerals, pretending a different set of events happened.
We're here today to remember the victims of Transoceanic Flight 37. 123 brave souls lost in an instant, in a senseless act of violence. We're all truly sorry for your loss.
And the people would continue to support him, despite his evil, and he would continue to bathe in the worship and praise that he received. Before we can analyze Homelander, or anyone for that matter, it's not fair unless we look at their childhood, which is typically the psychological anchor for most people's traits. Homelander wasn't an accident. His inception was planned, created by scientists at Vought, using the DNA of a powerful supe named Soldier Boy, and a homeless runaway paid by Vought with $2,000 to carry the embryo to term. However, from his first entry onto Earth, it was violent straight away. His heat vision blasted through the stomach of his mother, killing her and 3 doctors in the process.
But you lasered her guts open from the inside. You rose in the air with your umbilical cord still attached like some creature out of myth. You killed 3 doctors and a nurse while you were at it, and then, just trust me, it was downhill from there. So yeah, everybody was terrified of you from your first breath.
From that point on, he never had a normal childhood. Although they gave him an actual name, John, he wasn't raised like an actual human. He became a test subject for Vought. They knew that having the DNA of Soldier Boy would give him elite powers, so they conducted tests to reveal the extent of these powers. Some of these tests included being put in a human-sized oven to see if his skin would burn, which caused him excruciating pain, and even being forced to fight strength-enhanced Vought guards, only as a child. They also brainwashed him to be extremely patriotic, so he would grow up and serve America. But their worst feat, in my opinion, was bringing in expert psychologists that set up a program that conditioned him to crave affection, love, and approval.
Your need for approval and for love brought in the best psychologists in the world. We developed the protocol to carefully engineer that need so that you would be obedient. In many ways, that was our greatest success.
Despite having these extreme powers that would have allowed him to escape at any moment, he stayed because he feared disappointing the scientists, even though they essentially tortured him.
You should have been raised in a home with a family who loved you, not in a cold lab with doctors.
This upbringing would set up multiple inevitable traits in his adult life. He would always search for that validation wherever he went, making sure to please people so that they praised and loved him. He'd do whatever he was told, even though he wielded the ability to overpower everyone, and he would seek out parental figures where he could, as he was deprived of that. He was brainwashed to serve America, and he didn't get to think for himself. And all of this further down the line would cause him to resent his childhood when he found out the truth. After they'd created their successful project, Vought presented Homelander to the public as the new leader of the Seven, but behind the scenes, the true horror of the type of evil he would be was evident. On one of his earlier missions, where he was supposed to save some hostages, he'd end up killing everyone in a fit of rage, including the hostages, before covering it up to the press, saying there was an explosion and he tried to save everyone, when in reality, he ripped everyone apart. Later down the line, he met a married woman at Vought named Becca Butcher, and shortly after, he would sexually assault her, and unbeknownst to him at the time, he would impregnate her, changing the course of her and her partner's life forever. He would cause destruction but leave none of it behind, because even if Vought knew about his atrocities, they would help cover it up just as much as he did, and this conditioned his belief that he could get away with evil as long as he controlled public perception. Homelander would develop an interesting relationship with Madeline Stillwell. She was in charge of the Seven and therefore, despite being an inferior human, had power over Homelander, causing him to be submissive towards her.
You just need to let me protect you.
Oh, you're going to protect me?
Mm-hmm. Gods are pure, and they're perfect, and they're above it all. And they need to stay that way.
Not only did she act as his boss, but as his maternal figure. She would talk to him with a soft, mother-like tone, and this caused Homelander to believe that Madeline loved him. He was void of any motherly love as a child, and Madeline knew this and fed into this weakness to make him listen to her. However, she only did this to fulfill her own self-serving needs, as if Homelander did all the right things publicly, she could get the supes into the military, which would give Vought a multi-billion-dollar contract. Madeline wasn't just controlling Homelander, she was shaping his very psychology. Whether she realized it or not, she was creating the perfect Oedipus complex. This was a theory by Sigmund Freud, who believed boys form strong attachments and desires to their mothers because they are the first source of love and comfort. Homelander never had this, so when Madeline steps in as a nurturing yet manipulative figure, she fills that role. He'd even get jealous when she prioritized her own baby over him, seeing him as competition for her love. At his core, Homelander is stuck in emotional infancy, still seeking the mother he never had. However, this relationship would take a dark turn. As the story progressed, Homelander would later find out that he impregnated Becca Butcher and that he had a son, This resulted in two contrasting emotions. All of a sudden, he was hopeful. He had a son out there, a chance to build a family, a legacy even. However, he was also disappointed in Stillwell, as she knew this the whole time. She'd lied to him and manipulated him just like everyone else at Vought. And when he finds her in a hostage situation, she admits to him that she's scared of him.
Scared. I'm scared of you.
What?
I said I'm scared.
Of?
Of you. I'm scared of you.
In that moment, something in Homelander snapped. For years, Madeline had been untouchable, his mother figure, his guide, the only human he had ever truly submitted to. But now, with her voice trembling and her eyes wide with fear, she was just like everyone else, weak, beneath him. And in an instant, the admiration died. He had no more use for her, so he murdered her, burning his heat vision into her eyes, penetrating her brain. It was here Homelander was starting to show a pattern of sociopathic tendencies. A sociopath lacks empathy, displays impulsive behavior, shows a tendency towards violence, and a few other traits that Homelander seems to have. He murdered the innocent hostages during one of his first missions, which was extremely impulsive and violent. On the flight where he decided not to save the passengers of the falling plane, he used threats and aggression to control them from protesting, threatening to use his heat vision and kill them all there and then if they don't step back.
Stay the back, or I'll laser you, goddammit! I'll laser every one of you!
Then his lack of empathy to let the plane go down, even when a little girl was pleading to him to be saved. And then with Stillwell, with her baby son nearby and her career on the rise, he murders her because his feelings were hurt, which again was impulsive and lacking empathy, as well as his tendency towards being violent. Homelander is probably this way because of that childhood trauma. They hurt him as a child and showed him no love, so he has little to no love to give to anyone else, and his emotional understanding is void. He was becoming a scary force, wielding too much power to match with his disturbed psychology, and anyone associated with him should have feared for their lives. After Stillwell's death, Homelander began to spiral. This is likely due to the fact he had no one to hold his reins, and now his darkness could come to light. He would introduce himself to his newfound son, named Ryan, who was unaware of his own powers, being raised in isolation with Becca. It became a mission for Homelander to connect with Ryan and teach him of his power.
You could not possibly understand. I do not want my son to have to go through what I went through. When he sees the outside world, he is going to panic. And that's gonna fuck him up.
He would have to take his time with Ryan, but at least now he had some sort of purpose. However, in his public superhero life, he suddenly started to experience a loss of control. He was used to the public applauding him, praising and worshipping him because he was the people's protector. But things would take a dark turn. In Africa, there was a terrorist with superpowers, and Homelander flew over to eliminate him. He did so with one strike of his heat vision before flying away. However, unbeknownst to Homelander, behind the terrorist was a teenage civilian who also got hit by Homelander's strike and died instantly. And the worst part was, a bystander had recorded the incident on a phone and posted it online, leading to public outcry.
After Homelander's war crime, how can I stay quiet and still look my daughter in the eyes? I can't.
When Homelander's assistant brought this to his attention, his response was,
So what, they're all starving, but one of them's got a fucking cell phone?
further highlighting his disregard for human life. When he tries to calm down the people protesting his actions, he's only met with hostility, and he has a vision of murdering everyone, a brutal massacre. This shows signs that he harbors both narcissistic and sadistic tendencies. Narcissism in the way he can't tolerate people not submitting to him, taking him off the pedestal, and sadism in the way he fantasizes mass murder. In this moment, he needed someone to save him, and that was where Stormfront came in. Stormfront was a new addition to the Seven, and when she saw Homelander struggling with a bad reception, she came to his aid, using her social media skills to shift the narrative. She then fed into Homelander's desire to be loved by giving him compliments and admiration.
You will be the man who will lead us. You are everything that we dreamed of. We found each other, and now neither of us has to be alone ever again. And that is the truth.
The two of them began a relationship. He becomes submissive to her as she flatters him while simultaneously being powerful. Homelander thought he had found something real, a partner who loved him unconditionally, but in reality, Stormfront was no different than Stillwell. She praised him, adored him, made him feel like the most important man in the world, and he let her take control, not realizing that she wasn't there to love him, she was there to use him. The two of them then decide to essentially steal Ryan from Becca and try to raise him as their little super family. However, this wouldn't last long, as Becca and her husband Billy would track them down and retrieve Ryan, and when Stormfront got close to killing Becca, Ryan finally wielded the ability to use his powers, using his heat vision as he almost burned Stormfront to death trying to save his mother, who he accidentally ended up killing in the process. Homelander is forced to let Ryan go, and he spirals further downwards. Stormfront would be hospitalized, but would later take her own life, taking another person Homelander loved away from him. In the midst of finding out this information, he was on a rooftop about to save a girl named Chelsea from jumping off, but after the news, he decided that Chelsea didn't get to live anyway.
I think you should jump.
I don't think I want to.
You don't want to? Why don't you show a little follow-through, Chelsea? Jump.
Please, I just want to get
I'm not
down.
suggesting anymore. Jump.
Oh God, oh God.
No. No God. The only man in the sky is me.
Homelander was done pretending. The days of saving people, of playing the hero, it all felt like a joke now. If the world wasn't going to love him, then it didn't deserve his protection. So when Chelsea begged for her life, he didn't feel pity, he didn't feel guilt, he felt nothing. And with a cruel smirk, he gave her a choice: jump or suffer something worse. With all these extreme events, Homelander was scrambling mentally. For the first time, he actually had to fight for the public's approval, the same people who used to blindly idolize him, and he was losing more and more control of things as time went on. And when a member of the Seven named Starlight was given a scripted speech alongside him, he decided to pull back the curtain and reveal who he truly is.
I don't make mistakes. I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better. I am better. I'm not some weak-kneed and crybaby that goes around apologizing all the time. And why the would you want me to be?
He let the people know the real him, what he's overcome, all unfiltered.
My whole life, rich people, powerful people tried to muzzle me, cancel me, keep me impotent and obedient like I'm a puppet. You know what? It worked. Because I allowed it to work. And guess what? If they can control me, then you can bet your ass they can control you. They already do, you just don't realize it.
And although this was said with an impulsive outburst of emotion, the people will go on to support him, as they saw him as confident and unapologetic, something they can get behind. And this twists Homelander's mental in a way he's never known. For once, he didn't have to act for the public. The words he was saying weren't wrought script he was taught from the start. For once, he spoke in a way that he actually felt, going completely against the script. And instead of backlash, he was supported. And this affected him because at last he felt free to rule how he wanted. He had broken away from the chains that bound him, and this gave him a great surge of confidence, as well as power, something he would visibly abuse. He would start to humiliate other members of the Seven, because he knew that they were too afraid to oppose him. One member, the Deep, had water-related superpowers, including the ability to have relationships and talk to sea animals. So for no real reason, Homelander forced Deep to eat a live octopus, one that Deep could literally hear praying not to be eaten, praying for its life.
Holy shit, it's Timothy. He's my friend. I can't eat him. I'm not gonna eat him.
Oh, yes, you can. Deep. Timothy is delicious.
He's begging for his life.
But out of fear, he eats it.
Eat Timothy.
He's praying. He's praying.
He also randomly announces on television that he's in a relationship with Starlight, even though she hates his guts, but she doesn't deny it, also out of fear. Queen Maeve was a closeted bisexual, and Homelander decided to announce to the public that she was a lesbian, and again out of fear, she just went with it. He enjoyed having so much power over everyone in such a sadistic way. For Homelander, it wasn't just about the power, it was about the control. He didn't want teammates, he wanted puppets. He wanted to watch them squirm, to remind them that their fates were in his hands. If they feared him, they would never dare betray him. And if they obeyed, they proved what he'd always believed. He was superior. However, the only time we see him scared is when that power is threatened. And that occurred when Soulja Boy returned. To the public and to Homelander himself, Soulja Boy was Homelander before Homelander, possessing the greatest superpowers in the world during his time, but had one day disappeared, presumed dead, but had now returned decades later. Homelander had spent his entire life believing he was the greatest being to ever live, but now, standing before him, was proof that he wasn't unique, that he wasn't special, that he was just another experiment, another version of something that had existed before, and for the first time, he felt something new, the feeling of fear. His power was challenged, and it made him deeply insecure in an instant. He questioned himself. his powers, something he never had to do before. This led to a great paranoia, one where he even started talking to a different version of himself in the mirror, guiding him towards a path to take. He expresses his fears about being defeated by Soldier Boy and asks himself if taking over the company was even the right call. His mirror self reassures him that he will get them out of trouble, just like he always did when they were young.
When we were kids, alone in the bedroom, I got us through it, right? Don't I always? Always. No matter what. No matter what. And now, I'll get us through this, just as long as you and me stick together.
As Homelander's duty to protect America from Soldier Boy, who was now a threat, he brings the fight to him, getting the upper hand at first before being outnumbered and having to flee. Shortly after this, Soldier Boy calls Homelander to break the news to him that he's put the pieces together and uncovered that he's actually Homelander's dad. This sends him into further confusion about who he is. The fact that he had an actual father but wasn't raised by him broke him even more. When he asked his teammate Black Noir if he knew the whole time, since he used to fight alongside Soldier Boy, Noir nodded, resulting in Homelander murdering Noir, as he felt betrayed by this withheld information. He's faced with Soldier Boy again, but this time, he brings his son Ryan to the scene. He tells Soldier Boy that the three of them could be a family and never be alone again. Despite all his power, all his cruelty, there was still a part of Homelander that longed for something real, a father, a family. For a moment he thought he'd finally found it, that he could rewrite his story, that he didn't have to be alone. But reality crashed down just as quickly as the hope had risen.
Maybe if I'd raised you, I could have made you better, and not some weak, sniveling pussy, starved for attention. But there's no fixing that now. Weak? You. I know. You're a disappointment.
And when Soldier Boy rejected him, it wasn't just a fight. It was a reminder that no matter how strong he was, he would always be alone. They would end up fighting, a fight that Soldier Boy would end up losing and dying from. Homelander would then decide it's time to introduce Ryan to the public, let them know he had a son. They fly down to the applause from a crowd. However, one protester throws a can, hitting Ryan. In another impulsive rage, Homelander uses his heat vision to murder the man in broad daylight in front of a crowd. However, instead of outcry, the crowd starts slowly applauding.
Yeah! Yeah!
Which would then begin to reinforce that feeling of invincibility within Homelander, feeling once more that he could do as he pleases, whether it's torture, humiliation, or broad daylight murder. It was the final confirmation he needed. He had been afraid once that the world would turn on him, that they would punish him for showing his true self. But now, standing over the corpse of a man he had murdered in cold blood, watching the crowd erupt into cheers, he knew the truth. He was untouchable, a god among insects, and from this moment on, he would rule like one. As time went on, despite his undeniable power and invincibility, the only man he couldn't stop from hurting him was himself, his own mind, his own trauma. He spoke more to his mirror self, which had multiplied to different versions of himself telling him different things. At this point, he appears to be suffering from an extreme case of dissociative identity disorder. It's a severe dissociative condition where a person develops two or more distinct identities that control their behavior at different times. It usually develops as a coping mechanism for severe childhood trauma. And if you recollect from before, Homelander's mirror image had told him that he would get them out of trouble like he did when they were younger, meaning that Homelander may have developed this during his childhood. The mirror conversations became a form of dissociation, dealing with the PTSD of all the events that have occurred to him. His mind was no longer just his own. When he looked into the mirror, it wasn't just one reflection staring back, it was three. One whispered of power, telling him to embrace his godhood. Another scolded him, reminding him of his weakness, his need for love. And the third was something darker. It didn't whisper, it commanded, kill the weakness, end the sickness, go back to where it all began. He decides to go back to the Vault labs that created him, and upon arrival, the staff appear fearful at his presence alone. He recognizes some of them from his childhood and starts to get vengeful. He recalls that a scientist named Frank used to lock him inside the human-sized oven and turn it up to extreme temperatures to see if a child Homelander could be burnt. And although the skin didn't visibly burn, it caused excruciating pain, his tears sizzling as he screamed in pain, whilst Frank and the others just took notes. The anger and trauma bubbles within Homelander, as he then orders Frank to step inside the oven, threatening his family if he doesn't. Frank goes in, desperately trying to apologize, but Homelander was past that.
You're sorry? Now? Why?
You were just doing your job, right?
He locks him in, turns up the heat, and watches him burn. The smell of burning flesh filled the room as Frank sets alight, his hands clawing at the oven door. Homelander didn't flinch, he didn't smile, he just watched, his eyes flickering with something unreadable, justice, revenge, or perhaps just emptiness, as Frank's soul left the earth. Then he turns to Marty, the scientist who caught himself pleasuring and nicknamed him Squirt, making fun of him from that point on. He forced Marty to play with himself in front of all the other scientists, humiliating himself, before brutally murdering him too. He then went into a room with a scientist named Barbara, who was unafraid of him. Barbara tells him the truth about himself, how he killed his mother during birth, how the psychologists were brought in to condition him, and how he will never be able to overcome the human need for approval. However, Homelander feels he's already defeated it and taunts her.
I don't need any of it anymore.
He then brutally murders the rest of the scientists, splatting them all over the walls, and leaves only Barbara, lasering the door shut behind him, so she'll die of starvation in a room full of corpses. He was finally free of his past. As of the show so far, things are only on the up for him, as the newly elected president Stephen Calhoun is in full support of a soup-supported government, with Homelander at the forefront, giving him more power than ever. So what does this all mean for his psychology in general? What psychological concept could we label onto him? I think the best way to explain Homelander is through the Dark Tetrad, a collaboration of 4 conditions blending together to make one twisted individual, and all 4 are apparent within Homelander. Above all else, Homelander is a narcissist. He doesn't just crave worship, he demands it. He believes himself to be superior, above morality, above humanity itself. Without constant adoration, he crumbles. Without power, he's nothing. And when the illusion is threatened, he does what any god would do. He destroys. Homelander sees himself superior to everyone. He thrives on media attention and adoration. He compares himself to the likes of Martin Luther King.
Know who I've been reading up on lately?
Dr. Martin Luther King. He was villainized, persecuted, spoke truth to power, just like me. It's crazy. But we've both been to the mountaintop, and we've seen the promised land.
When he's disrespected or slighted, he lashes out violently, and without public admiration, he feels empty, driving his desperate need for approval from Vought and the public. He also evidently shows signs of psychopathy. Although given his trauma, I'd say he leans more to being a sociopath. He commits brutal acts without guilt, such as letting the plane crash, murdering Stillwell, or lasering that civilian. He maintains a charismatic public persona while remaining emotionally detached, alluding to his superficial charm, and he treats people as tools, discarding them with a cold calculation when they no longer serve his needs. Then there's sadism, which he most definitely shows signs of. He delights in dominating weaker individuals. We covered the scene where he made Chelsea jump, clearly relishing in the act. There was also another scene where a blind superhero tried to join the Seven, and Homelander then hit the guy's ears so hard that he screamed in agony, bleeding heavily from his ears.
And now you're just another useless fucking blind guy.
What made you think I would ever allow a cripple into the Seven, for sakes?
Destroying his most important sense, and likely killing him, he emotionally torments others like A-Train and the Deep, demanding that the two of them partake in a sexual act in front of the others, degrading them for his own pleasure, which is another sign of sadism at play. Even relationships with Stillwell and Stormfront reveal twisted power dynamics built on degradation, showing hints at sexual sadism also. And finally, his Machiavellianism. This is mainly where you control people using fear, but also manipulate things to control people even further. He uses threats and intimidation to enforce obedience with anyone close to him or anyone that works with him. He pits people against each other for personal gain, sacrificing others' relationships and even lives in some cases to further his own power. He also expertly controls his public image through social media and news manipulation, knowing how to keep the public praising him, both to feed his narcissism and to give him power and control. Homelander clearly shows signs of all 4 of the Dark Tetrad's traits, and all of this combined with his superhuman abilities means almost no one can stand in his way. The world has let Homelander do what he wants. He is murdered, tortured, and ruled with an iron grip, and yet the people still cheer. But no one is untouchable. With 1 season remaining, the only question is, will his downfall come from those who fear him, or will it come from the only enemy he has never been able to escape, himself? Because no matter the answer, his downfall is inevitable.